Hi, I'm Carrie Spalding, the 30something coach, and my guest today is Rebekah Manley, author of Alexandra and the Awful, Awkward, No Fun, Truly Bad Dates. And this is a picture book parody for adults. When I heard about this book and met Rebekah, I knew that we had to talk to her because I know her book is going to resonate with so many of you 30-something daters. So, Rebekah, thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So what led you to create Alexandra, to write this book?
I think it's a writing cliche, but they say write what you know. And I know bad dates. Um, and I think that there's a lot of humor there. I also have my background and my education is in writing picture books for children. And so I thought it'd be fun to kind of combine the two things and see what happened.
So yeah, I think I have heard from you that you feel like you got your MFA in dating.
Yes.
You're a true expert. So introduce us to your heroine. Who is she?
So Alexandra is, I'd say, a vivacious, about to turn 30 girl with a lot of great friends. And she's willing and open to just put herself out there and try 30 dates in 30 days and just see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you show her to us?
So here's the picture. And it says, single and turning 30, Alex challenged herself to hashtag 30 dates in 30 days. Coffee shops, happy hours, tapas galore, and endless who's getting the check tangos. How bad could it be? And what did she have to lose?
And how bad was it? How bad could it be, Rebekah? Yeah, so I love this beginning because so many 30-somethings are dealing with what I call 30-something panic, that feeling of, okay, if I was in my 20s, this would be okay, but it's time to figure this stuff out. And there can be such an urgency. And so there's something about Alexandra's experiment that is just so captures that essence of a combination of the 30-something panic and the can-do attitude of I'm going to make this happen. So what is different, do you think, about being single and dating when you're in your 30s as opposed to another time of life?
Absolutely. Well, kind of like what you just said, there's all of a sudden this urgency where you're like, well, I'm going to cram this in and we're going to figure this out. And I've gone through my 20s and I know hard work, so I can just apply that to everything else I want and just make it happen. And I think, in 20s, I think we're really encouraged to like live our adventure and travel and do things, which I would like to think can happen throughout our whole lives. But a weird thing happens when we turn 30 where a lot of our hard work from our 20s, it feels like that should just all of a sudden be a payoff. We should have found maybe that person or have that career, or in my case, that book should already have been published. And
Lots of shoulds.
yeah, there's a lot of shoulds, and I don't believe in them, but I also know that that's a tape that's played in my head before.
Oh, I hear you. I mean, my whole sort of 30-something coach origin story, I remember thinking when I was well before 30, come on, it's just a number. It doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. And then as I got closer, thinking, okay, cognitively, I know that this isn't something I should panic about. And I'm panicking. That's what I'm feeling. So it's a tough thing. And how do you think that dating, the actual practice of dating in your 30s, is different? How are people showing up differently than maybe they would in their 20s, or approaching the whole process in a different way?
I think that definitely feeds into, your question before. I've heard a friend say dating in your 30s is like a race to not waste anyone's time, like your time or someone else's. And so I think, maybe in our 20s, we're dating and we're just like super excited to be there with that person. And it's less like a job interview and more like just getting to know. But then in 30s, it can feel like there's like this check off list where it's like, well, these things didn't happen, so I better let this person know right away it's not right, versus kind of giving it a little bit of more organic space. And I don't know that that's the right thing, but I think that's the honest thing.
Mm-hmm. That's how people are feeling. And so, yeah, what do you think is the benefit of that, the cost of that? Like, what's the impact of showing up to a first date with almost like your little rubric in hand in the back of your head?
Yes. I had my secretary fax you some preliminaries. Um, I think that there's got to be a beautiful hybrid to that. I think knowing going into 30s, knowing non-negotiables, so sort of things that um, I know I need to be my best person and to be my best partner, be the best partner. I think those are good to have in the back of our minds. But I think as far as those first couple dates, I think it really should be more just enjoying each other and seeing how, we show up to the date.
Yeah. Um, so Alexandra goes on these dates, and she meets a bunch of characters. Maybe you could show us some of the guys that she gets to meet along the way.
Yeah,
I
this
think
is
they'll look familiar to our viewers and listeners.
yeah, so this is a fun thing that my publisher and illustrator wanted to do, which I love, which is like these profiles. And it's not supposed to be a certain dating app, but you may have
I
met
gotta
these.
say, it looks familiar.
Yeah, you may have actually met Thad on your dating apps. Thad, 29, from your dreams, 6 foot, cause you'll ask, winning at brunch, work hard, play hard, not your pen pal.
Be real, Rebekah. Which way you swiping here?
Like something I thought was really funny and during the pandemic was is your pen pal? Looking for a pen pal. I would have swiped left on that. I think that would be, there's some good things in there. Like I like someone that works hard and plays hard, but this kind of seems like someone writing what he thinks sounds good versus what maybe really who he is. Or maybe it is. Maybe that's how that is.
Yeah. So it's an interesting that gap between what's happening in our heads when we're creating our profiles. What are we trying to do? And what is the receiver receiving? And of course there's going to be variation depending on the person. And what I'm hearing you say is there's like it doesn't feel authentic to you. It feels like it's a performance.
Yeah. And I think authenticity is so key. And of course, that's really hard to do in a short space, but some sort of like organic nugget is something I look for.
Yeah. And who else does Alexandra get to meet?
Okay. Let's see. There's Patrick, number 28. He's available at your service. And according to his mom, he's man of the year. He'll make you dinner and smile. He's a keeper.
Well, that's some good evidence right there.
Yeah.
So, spoiler alert, Alexandra does go on 30 dates in 30 days, and there are some real rough ones in there. So tell us a little bit about, what is it? Maybe you can introduce us to, go ahead and just take us through maybe the first 3 dates that she goes on.
Sure. Well, the first one insisted she got to get the prime rib and that women should just accept that wage gap. And I like the line, Alex grabbed her steak to go and let him enjoy the financial success of buying her meal. I'm just paraphrasing. You'll have to read the whole book to see more of the language. The second one was super rude to the server. And he actually tossed his menu at the server and said, I can't believe you don't have a proper dessert wine. And Alex deserted him.
Fair enough.
Yep. And then the third one was probably Patrick from that profile. He treated his mom to a cruise every year, and actually ended up posting a photo and tagging his mom during the date. And then his mom ended up sharing that photo during the same date. And that one may or may not have been based on a true story.
We'll never know. Who would know? Nobody knows. So what is it that Alexandra goes on these dates and they feel terrible to her. What is it that makes us a bad date? Like, obviously the guys are going out trying to meet someone and end up really alienating Alexandra. What do you think are some of the things that people do, maybe unconsciously, that contribute to a date not going well or not being a match, not being a connection?
I think that's a great question, and something I kind of think about with Alexandra. I was reading through, I was like, what could she have done better in these dates? Um, the terminology, like you can't spot it if you don't got it. So it's like, what are the things that really bug me that someone does it? Is it something maybe I do myself? The server one is a really good example of one I know I'm aware of. Is I've worked in the service industry, so I'm very nice to people in public, and I actually have been on a date with someone who's like, I don't like it when whoever I'm with talks to people all the time, because I want them to just pay attention to me. And that was a real red flag because I love to talk to people. So kind of a short way of saying, like, pay attention how your date treats other people, which I think is pretty common knowledge. But then also, I know I'd like to own that I can get really into my own head. And sometimes it's good, like that person says something really insightful, and I want to think about it for a second. But then I realize I kind of zone out and I may seem disinterested, where
Mm-hmm.
it's really not the case at all. So just kind of paying attention to how I am being present in the date is something.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot, where when we're on, especially a first date, right? There's so much um anticipation sometimes, and we're quickly making calculations and judgments about people, whether or not we mean to. And we can really get in our own heads. And the more in our own heads we're not really present to the human being in front of us. So you have to wonder, with these guys that Alexander's meeting, where's the stop and check, right? Are we aligned? Are we connected here? How do you think people can deepen that actual connection when on a date?
That's a really great question. And my answer might sound like a contradiction, but I want to say it. Number one, listening really, really well and asking really good questions. Um, but then also something I've learned recently, because I'm a writer and I'm super curious, is I don't always leave space for other people to ask questions. I might get upset, like, oh, that person didn't ask me any questions. Well, did I leave any space for it? Did I pause and let there be like a little silence before I ask my next question? Um, I think that's something that I'm learning, is to ask questions, but then hold space for questions.
Yeah, so that, and I can imagine that people are find themselves on both sides of that as you talk, where am I so curious about the other person, and where is that genuine curiosity? Where is that possible a little protection of myself, right? And it's like scary to be seen, and so I want to focus all my attention on the other person. It could come from a lot of different places, and wherever it's coming from, there's that balance of the other person getting to be curious about you. And I love that example, Rebekah, because so often we'll make snap judgments about other people without considering where our own contribution to that might be, right? So you might come out of a date thinking, wow, that person was so self-centered. They didn't ask me a single thing about themselves, right? Without even having that awareness that you had of, oh, wait a second, I didn't actually leave any space for that. So that sounds like a really great tip, that, if you find yourself coming out of a date having a strong judgment of somebody, just getting curious, not turning the judgment back on yourself, but just getting gently curious about it. Like, how might I have played into that pattern? Or what else could it be, is always a great question, right? So it seems like she's disinterested. What else could it be that could be going on here?
I like that. I'm going to use that. What else could it be?
Yeah. So Obviously, it gets pretty discouraging for Alexandra. And I wonder, since you do have an MFA in dating, um, how do you, or how does she, how do we replenish our optimism and our motivation to keep dating and getting out there when it's discouraging? I have so many clients who will say, like, I want to start dating again. I want to get out there, but I'm so tired of the apps. Or, I feel like it's just a never ending, discouraging cycle. So how do you replenish that optimism and that motivation?
What I really like about what you said is the word replenish, because I think about, like with anything else, it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to own that this is exhausting, and what was once fun, like, oh, fun experiment, 30 days in 30 days, yay, lots of cocktails, can be, it's okay to step away and take a breather. I've actually done no date Feb a couple times in my life, where I just am like, you know what? It's a short month coming out of the holidays, and I want to just focus on the love I already have in my life. And that ties back to the replenishing, is just kind of feeding into my friendships and letting them feed, flow into me, and focusing on the love that's already there. And then, get back out there when you feel ready. And it's a fun time. I mean, I think coming out of this, the roaring 20s, like I call them, it's really okay to take breaks, because everything takes more energy and mental power than normal. So to give grace for that replenishment in space. That's what I
Yeah. And what do you say to someone who says, okay, like, yeah, I get that it makes sense. It's probably right. It's good for me. I need it. But I have 30 something panic, right? Like, oh my gosh, like I can't afford to take a break, right? The clock is ticking. What if
Yeah.
I don't meet someone because I'm not pushing it hard enough? I'm not out there enough.
Have you been reading my journal? um, Something someone told me that I thought was helpful, and again, this shouldn't be as a should, but I think that sort of anxiety, the understanding that, like, taking care of ourselves and how we show up and the peace that is in our heart can be felt by the other person. And if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't replenish, that anxiety can be felt by the person across the table. And I would encourage people to do the self-care that they need, so that they show up feeling like, I've got this. I've got a lot of good things going on in my life. It would be a total bonus to find, a great addition and compatibility to my life, but I'm doing well, and I'm excited to meet you, and to kind of put that out in the world. And that, I think, takes the replenishment, and I think it takes the self-care and the intentionality.
Something else I noticed that I love about what you just shared with your little joke about have I been reading your journal, is that I think sometimes we compare our, I'm not the first person to say this, I don't know who was, but we compare our insides to other people's outsides. And somebody might look at you talking about, the importance of self-care and replenishing, but they don't have access to your journal, right? And they don't know, hey, here's a positive, resilient dater, right? Optimistic, and might get confused and think that if I'm feeling this way, if I wake up in a panic at 3 a.m, right, that I'm doing it wrong. And what I'm hearing is that it's like, it's normal to have these moments of overwhelm or panic or negativity or discouragement, and that we can replenish ourselves. And it doesn't mean that we're doing it all wrong if we have those moments of just it's
Yeah.
not working.
Yeah, especially during this season we're in, where there are even more obstacles to everyday life. And, whenever anyone listens to this, it could be years from now, I think they'll be able to relate to what we're going through right now. And it's just a tough time, and it's okay. And it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, call me 5 days from now and I can be in tears, you know, like it's, it's okay to be where we
And
are.
that's okay too, right? It's like that's part of the process, and so much of it is okay, how do we meet ourselves in that moment where we're feeling the hurt and the hardness. So what are some of the tools that that you've used or that you imagine Alexandra using to sort of boost herself back up? You mentioned journaling. What else tends to be really grounding?
Well, a major theme in this book is friendship. And she kind of recaps her dates and hashtags, but that was originally seen as the debrief of the date on a text thread with their friends. And it didn't show up that way in the illustrations, and we felt like it still worked. But maybe one day, if it's a movie, it'll be like the little bubble, you know? um, I think that connection and yeah, to make sure we stay connected with people who know our core. Even for me, is I need to be around people that see in me what I can forget in myself, and to have those key friendships and relationships where I can call and be like, I've kind of forgotten today. Can you remind me what this is all for? What do you see in me? Can you remind me? And I have those good friends, and I do the same for them.
We need that that witnessing sometimes, because we can get definitely skewed in our own view of ourselves when we're on the other side of it. So you've mentioned a lot about how this time in particular is hard, and many people are feeling, who are already maybe feeling a bit panicked about finding a partner, dating, are feeling even more discouraged due to COVID and due to the lockdown, and the lack of the mobility to be able to date in the way that that we used to. So what are your thoughts about that? How is dating during COVID different? What do you see as, are there things that make it just like, hey, some people say, this just isn't, I'm not going to meet anyone right now, this isn't a good time to date? Or do you actually see it as maybe there's some hidden advantages to dating during this time?
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to own that I've definitely had those conversations with tears. Like, this is a major speed bump to what I want to accomplish in my life. And, with writing and with dating, my book came out during 2020, and it was like, oh, this isn't how I saw it
This is
happen.
not the launch I planned.
Yeah, this is not what and so I want to own that. And I wanted to make sure I said that before what I'm about to say, because what I am about to say could sound falsely positive, but I am a huge communicator. I mean, I write and process, and words are super important to me. And so what I found is one positive is this whole thing has given like us like this permission to talk things out. Not that that didn't exist before, but it's kind of removed barriers. So the whole conversation of, hey, I'd love to meet up, but I'm only doing outside dates. And this is where my comfort level is. I don't think we had that kind of communication on the front end. And if we rewind, even the conversations leading up, I think it would be before it'd be like, well, we connected, let's just meet and see if we have anything. Whereas now, like, oh, well, there's actually like some risks involved with just meeting anyone. And let's slow it down a little bit. So it doesn't feel like so much of a speed bump, is more as like liberty to be in communication and to kind of get a feel on for how receptive that person is for the communication too, because that'll transfer to all areas of life.
Yeah, a lot of people, as you talk, I'm thinking how this time has required us to um, speak of our needs and to actually own our needs and our preferences in a way that we may not do so explicitly. To be able to, because when there is that feeling of there's like life or death stakes here,
Yes.
it's like there's some part of you that's like, you just got to be able to do that. You've got to be able to speak up. And that practice of being able to go through that awkward dance of talking to somebody else about, what are you comfortable with, what do you need? I'm seeing that too, that people are finding their voices and their courage to be a bit more direct about what they're looking for, what they're comfortable with, where their boundaries are. and boundaries are certainly something that are important in any relationship. So it would be interesting to see how this practice, how this little laboratory of boundary communication ends up paying off for people or not.
I've also heard it said that it kind of takes it back in a good way at times to like the old fashioned times where people would write each other letters. Like if that's something that you've romanticized, well, good thing, you know. Also, the saving the time and the money of not necessarily going out for the first date, but connecting over a call or a Zoom date. And I don't know, I choose to see that as a pro for now.
And it does sort of activate that playful creativity of, okay, how can we make this seem as if it's a different experience than the one that either we've had together over and over and over again, or that I've had with many other people in the same space that I'm in. So yeah, I love that take on it. And it can be so motivating when we can look for what nobody would wish this to be the case, that this is happening. And can we look for how might this be positive in some ways, or how might I give this some purpose for me in my life? So I'm curious, Alexandra goes on this journey, and we won't give away the end, but it's not without fruit, right? It bears fruit, right? The journey bears some fruit in her life, let's say. And we won't say how, but what tips do you have for making any first date, even an awful, awkward first date, a good date? What is our power to make any date a good date, no matter who we're showing up with?
That's such a good question. And I'm going to share something that I've just came up with off the top of my head just now. So I hope it flows out.
That's often the good stuff.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how I genuinely believe this is, 30 minutes to an hour talking to someone new is time well spent, because it's almost like this opportunity to see what else is going on in the world. And especially during this time, like our scope is so limited in the four walls that we're used to. And so continuing with that idea of this is just a fun way to kind of be reminded of what's out there in the world, good or bad. Just a reminder. And just absorbing that. And to hint at some of Alexandra's fruits, which they're hidden in the illustration. So I'm excited to read that. Is, what, you may show up for a date with someone, but you may come away with something that you didn't even know you're looking for. And that could be a bonus in some way. So I leave you with that.
Yeah, that I'm excited for people to discover that too by reading your book. And that's so powerful. It really helps us take our power back in any scenario when we can, I call this the multi-win mindset, right? That there are multiple wins that could come from any given scenario. And I take on the philosophy in my life that has borne a lot of fruit for me. There will always be a win. I just don't know what the win will be. And so as I hear you talk about this idea, okay, sometimes the fruits that can be born, I'm not sure of my grammar there, are not necessarily the same ones that we went in for. The power that we have to trust, to show up and trust there's something here for me on my journey. And I might not even know what it is at the end of the night, right? I might not know what came out of this little experiment, right? This first date right away, but there will be some sort of a win for me. I think that can be very buoying in that kind of discouraging landscape.
I like that. I have a friend, Erin, who does the You're Such a Catch podcast, and she has Instagram, and she recently posted, instead of thinking, why me, reframe it as teach me. I think it's okay to think why me. It's okay to be sad and upset, but then like
That's what the journal's for.
Yeah, exactly. And there's usually something that we can learn that comes out of that, which is the win you're talking about. I'm trying to
Well, so it's like, can Alexandra go home at the end of each date and say, what did I learn? Right. That gives us so much more of a like a access to a benefit than just kind of pointing the finger at this person that was, rude or wasn't really paying attention. What does that tell me about what I need, right? Or what's important to me or what I value? Or sometimes, I don't know if this has happened to you, Rebekah, but that like, oh, I could have said this, or why didn't I speak up? And when I felt uncomfortable about this, I could have voiced my own opinion. And those coulda, woulda, shouldas, they're nasty when they show up as an inner critic. But where they can be useful is if we can say them with, opportunity for the future, right? Next time, this is what I can do, or this is what I can try.
Yes.
Yeah. So I love the way that that this character lets us go through all of the emotion of dating without actually having to be the one sitting there, right? We get to be the friend that she's like texting from the bathroom.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm really curious, before we wrap up, so many 30-somethings know themselves to be creatives. And I have lots of clients who are creatives and feel like I'm in my 30s and everything feels higher stakes. And if it hasn't happened now, maybe it's a little bit late for me to start. And I'm curious, as a 30-something who's just published your first book, what advice do you have for somebody who knows that they have a creative project inside of them, or they know themselves to be a creative? Maybe their day job isn't really one that fulfills that part of them. What advice do you have for somebody who has maybe some limiting beliefs about that, but really wants to break through and give birth to whatever they're meant to be doing in the world?
Okay, well, I think we should have a conversation just on that, because I've got a lot. Number one, please don't give up. I have a really good friend who's publishing her first book in her 70s, and that's not going to say that, that's when will happen for you, but just please don't give up. Number two goes into a twofold is please consider surrounding yourself with at least one person that can encourage you and check in with you on your goals. That has worked so well for me, is to set these dreams, these hopefully manifestations, in a list, in a hopeful list, but then also make active goals that I can control, because I can't control if I get a publishing contract. I can't control those milestones, but I can control the goals where I show up every Saturday and I have a friend that I've asked to text me every Saturday and ask me what I'm working on. And so, yeah, don't give up, and have someone that you can say, this is what I'm working on. Can you ask me about it, encourage me? And how can I do that for that person? There's so much more I can say, but if we're going to talk about three, those would be the three.
That's such great advice. And I'm just taking what you said in my head and layering it onto the dating, right? And you could say the same thing, right? You can't control the outcome, because this is another human that you're looking for. You can't control who's going to be on the other side of that date or how it's going to go. You can control that you show up, and how you show up, and how you resource yourself to go through that process.
Yes. And that's actually what I wrote about in the dedication, just comparing the dating and writing. They're so similar in the disappointments and the buildup and the shoulds, and we should have this by now, and I want this to happen. And then you can't control, but we can control how we get to the page, how we're like, you know what, I'm going to try this date. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be open. Preach.
Yeah. And I mean, for those of you who are going through a career change, it's a very similar process where, you know, you're putting yourself out there and you're taking all the steps that you can take. And at the other end, there is an element that's not directly in your control. So great advice, a whole lot to come out of a picture book for adults. um, so Rebekah, thank you so much for sharing with us today. And where can people find Alexandra, and where else can they find more about you?
Oh, I love that. Well, Alexandra will come to you wherever you want. You just have to order her. She's available at anywhere you would get a book. I got really excited when I saw her at Target.com, Amazon. I really recommend your local bookstore. You can find that, bookshop.org. But my website has a lot of those places listed. So if you just go to RebekahManley.com, you can just one stop click there. But I also am excited for people to check out my website because I have a lot of fun things on there. Like I have a singles registry. Like, you know what? I loved your baby showers and I loved your wedding, but I've got a few things I need. I have some fun Galentines up. There's cocktail recipes that are based on the book. I do have that application to date me on the book about me. And there's a lot of fun things. So I hope you check it out and have fun with what I've put up there for y'all.
Well, thank you for bringing so much fun and joy into a topic that sadly can get a bit discouraging and joyless, and that's such a beautiful that just your very presence is a beautiful reminder that we can go through all the bumps in the road and take our joy where we can find it and keep moving forward. So Rebekah, thank you. And you can find me at carriespalding.com, the 30something coach. Please keep following Rebekah. I know this is just going to be the beginning of the joy she's pouring into the world through Alexandra. And I will be sure to link up those things that you shared so that people can see.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.